Hello and welcome to my first ever tournament report. I know it's been, almost 10 days, but this is what I took to Eternal Weekend. I took a mono blue Delver Tempo deck. I played a variant of this on the YouTube channel a couple months back, and I will link that in the video. You'll see a little tag probably up here somewhere. But I'll link that. It was a different variant that was not edited. I believe it was either Bosch and Roll or 3ABNU had done. But let's kind of jump into the deck tech, and I'll tell you about the experience, and then just kind of go over some of my matches. So the deck is just mono blue. I figured that was the easiest way for me to get into Legacy and not spend a ton of money. Because I did purchase a lot of the things like the Force of Negations, Force of Will, Stifle, as well as Wastelands, and some of the other things too, back to basics, and the really expensive one being Null Rod. These were the cards that I kind of put together last minute. Not last minute, but like these are the ones I really had to go out of the way to kind of purchase that were a little more pricey. Overall, though, I ran 12 creatures. This is probably a little high for a Delver deck, but I wanted higher threat density so I could get things out. But also, a lot of the creatures were utility as well, right? So Brazen Borrower, it's a 2-mana bounce spell. Delver, primary threat in the deck. Fairy Mastermind, perfect against the other Delver variants that were running around that were trying to draw a lot of cards. Also good against the Beanstalk style decks where they're just drawing cards constantly. So whenever they would draw their second card, we would get a card. And of course, our high-end threat would be Murktide here. Our draw engine was Ponder. I had 4 Ponders, 4 Preordain, 4 Brainstorm, and I ran also 2 Thought Scour. Thought Scour, the idea here being that I could self-mill and draw a card as a cantrip to try and get my Murktide out a little bit faster. Aside from that, just a bunch of interaction with Daze, Force of Negation, Force of Will, and Spell Pierce and Stifle. Land base, we ran 18 lands. I believe it was 6 basics. Yeah, 6 basics there. And let's see here, 7 fetches, a Mystic Sanctuary to be able to return a spell back to the top of my library, and 4 Wastelands to keep opponents off of their mana. The sideboard, running back to basics because a lot of decks were very heavy as far as using non-basic lands. So this just kind of hampered those decks. Blue Elemental Blasts because Boros Initiative, and there was a Goblins deck kind of running around on MTGO that I was a little worried about. So that was for anything that was running red. Also, it was good against the Teamer Delver, Grixis Delvers, because you could then counter Lightning Bolts or just kill Dragon Rage Channelers, whatever. Ran 1 Dismember, 1 Dress Down. This was for decks that like to use Ursa Saga. 1 Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn. This was mainly for Painter or Mill. 2 Energy Flux. This was for specifically 8 cast, but also probably came in for other artifact heavy decks. 1 Grafdigger's Cage. I was worried about specifically a Turbo Goblin deck that was running Muxus that could just spit out a ton of creatures. So Grafdigger's Cage was kind of my answer to that. And then Null Rod, also for artifact heavy decks. 2 Spreading Seas to go against land combo, and 2 Surgical Extraction to remove anything from the graveyard that might have been an annoyance or just that they might have had in hand that I had already countered once. But that's the deck tech. That's kind of everything that I played. To just kind of go over the experience overall. Holy moly. all right, this is my first big experience, my big tournament. 995, 96 people. I talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but overall, I just had a blast there. It was really interesting kind of talking to people and just learning more about like their backgrounds and where they're from. A lot of the RCs and stuff is a bunch of local people here that I've been to, and a lot of people that I would really just, I wouldn't ask, oh, hey, where are you from? It's, I know they're from Pittsburgh, right? I had one opponent was visiting because he's originally from the States, but he's been living in South America, helping them on not mission work, but humanitarian work. So wells, Doctors Without Borders, stuff like that. Just a bunch of other opponents too that just traveled because they loved giant competitive Magic gatherings. But it was really great talking to those people, talking to some people maybe that have been out of Magic for a while and came back because Eternal Weekend's back after the pandemic and they're just excited. But really fun. Also kind of, I got my 2 Brazen Borrowers signed in the deck. The artist, Eric, what's his name? Eric, where is it on here? Does it just not say it on here? I guess it doesn't show it. But Eric is I can't remember his last name. He was there. He signed my Brazen Borrowers for me in a really cool metallic blue. So that's really awesome. I wish I would have had my whole play set there to get the whole thing signed. But when you go to tournaments and events like that, always check the artist list, because I was not expecting them to be there, but they were front and center prominent. As soon as you walked in, you saw the artists' booths there. Lots of vendors there as well. A lot of bigger vendors, I think, took up a lot of space. I don't remember seeing a lot of like local vendors, which was interesting to see. I would have preferred to see maybe some more local vendors, or maybe they were local vendors and they just don't have a brick and mortar store that's listed. It's also kind of late right now, so I'm maybe getting a little loopy. But let's get into the matches, right? You want to hear the tournament report, you want to hear the matches, and everything that I did. So let's just run through it. So I have a notepad up. I'm not gonna show that to you guys, but match 1 I had was against Cascade Rhinos, and that was a rough matchup for me. Round 1 I did end up winning. I was able to get him down to 1 pretty quick. I think just using a Fairy Mastermind or a Delver. Also that's the other thing too. This is the first event where I took a notebook and took actual notes per round, trying to get better, trying to improve my competitive play. But anyways, yeah, so that was the first thing. I mulled the 2, or I'm sorry, I had to mull twice. So I was at a little bit of a disadvantage, but luckily his game plan was a little slower than mine. Round 2 in that, I also had to mull twice. That was on the draw, so obviously. But he was able to resolve, I think, his Rhinos that time and was able to really, really get moving. Round 3, I didn't have any mull. We went to turns because I believe the first 2 rounds took us up until I think we started at 4 minutes left. Yeah, we started game 3 with 4 minutes left on the timer, and we ended up going to rounds. During that 4 minutes, I was so panicked trying to finish the round within the time. I wasn't thinking about it. I was rushing, trying to play fast. I should have just played normally. I probably would not have made mistakes. I definitely feel like I was just playing cards to just get things out of my hand and get stuff on the battlefield to try and push a board state that I could argue I would have won. But that's that's not the way I should have been playing. I should have been playing as if I had unlimited time, gone to the turns, and then figured it out after the 5 turns. So that was pretty bad. Also realized, kind of like hindsight's 2020, I should have mulled for more threats. I think I only had like 1 or 2 threats, and I just could not keep them on the board. He was also running Brazen Borrower, and so he just kept bouncing things back to my hand. I think I had a Murktide or 2 that got thrown out there, and he just bounced it back to hand, and I had to refill the graveyard to get the Murktide back out. Ultimately, though, he did end up winning, I believe, with like 4 rhinos out all at once. Let's see here. Yeah, my early threats, I could just... I should have been on turn 3 here. I have a note to myself saying on turn 3. In game 3, I should have played a Delver to go wider. I believe I played something else that took up the mana. So there, learned a little bit from that, and yeah, definitely I gotta stop rushing. Let it go to turns and have a judge figure it out from there. If you guys do anything, if we would have just gone to turns and I would have still been alive, we could have done a draw, and it would have been nicer for my standings overall if we would have drawn, with a 1 win, 1 loss. So I'm actually going to try and pull up Melee as well. To tournament view. I want to see... I want to see if I can look at my tournament overall. Oh, yeah. If I haven't mentioned overall, I went what did I do? 3-4? Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, you can see it over here. The opponent won, and that was unfortunate for me. And there was also apparently 1 other mono blue tempo player in the list. We'll talk about that in a moment. My round 1 opponent, though, he ended up in the tournament going 4-3 at rank 377 to my 582. So he did pretty well. He only played 7 rounds, so he played just as many rounds as I did, but definitely did a little better. Round 2, though, match 2 was against Elves. Match 2 was Elves. That was a really rough match for me. Game 1 of there, I did no mulligan. I lost. I had a bit of a misplay early in that game. I think it was turn 2 or 3. He was playing a Heritage Druid. He completely tapped out, and I just let it resolve. I had a daze in hand. I could have dazed it and stopped it from happening, because as soon as he resolved that Heritage Druid, he was able to produce a lot of mana and go really wide. In this match, on round 1, I believe he fetched for something, and I stifled his fetch, but in response, he tried to play Veil of Summer. We had to get a judge involved, because I believe the way Veil of Summer is worded is it's permanents or spells that you control, not triggered abilities or activated abilities. So I was able to convince him, or not convince him, but the judge ruled that because Veil of Summer was not protecting the ability, mine resolved. Now he still did get to draw a card off of that, so yeah, it is what it is. But I was able to choke his mana out a little bit, and that maybe is what helped me go a little longer in that game, because I unfortunately, though, only got him down to 18, and he got me down pretty quick. In game 2, he was able to resolve a Allosaurus Shepherd on like turn 1 or something like that. And the Shepherd there, all green spells cannot be countered. So that was really rough. I believe I had a handful of counter spells, and I just couldn't do anything with it. I eventually drew into a Brazen Borrower, and I could not, like, I was able to bounce that thing, counter something, but as soon as he played the Shepherd again, I just couldn't do anything. Overall, my deck just did not have anything to deal with go wide strategies. What sucks is a couple days before I had, in one of my practice matches, I was going up against one of those Turbo Goblin decks on MTGO, and I was like, oh man, maybe I should put Propaganda in the deck in case this Goblin deck, it's starting to gain a lot of popularity with Muxus and everything. Maybe I should put Propaganda in there to kind of prevent them from attacking with everything. Propaganda might have helped here, but ultimately it wasn't in the deck, so it didn't matter. My round 2 opponent on the Elves, he ended up going in the tournament 1-2, so I was his only win, and then he dropped directly after the third match. Let's see here. Next we have Mono Red Prison. And with Mono Red Prison, at this point, that was 2 losses in a row. One of them I just felt totally helpless with. It was a strategy that I had just not come across very often in my playtesting and when I say playtesting, I should just say in my league matches. But Mono Red Prison, round 1, I had to model once. The opponent opened up with an Ancient Tomb and a Chalice of the Void, which I had to force away. Then I was able to get a Delver down, but right after that, turn 2, he tries the Chalice again on 2, and I have a handful of 1-drop cantrips, so I had to let it go. I had to force again. So let's see, I was down to 6 cards. I had to force once, which is getting rid of 2, force twice, getting rid of 2 more, a land, and then a Delver. So my hand was spent. I could not do anything against that opponent. Game 1, though, I ended up getting them down to 9. Ended up getting them down to 9. Ultimately, they were able to resolve a Chaos Caves Adventure and start going through the initiative. So they were able to just really mess me up. Game 2, I was on the play. I had no mulligans. That time, I had a turn 1 Delver. Let's see here. The opponent tried to get rid of the Delver with a Boom Bust, which I had to force away. And I got a second Delver down on turn 2, but the opponent was able to do a Fury Evoke to kill both, so I never got them to flip. I had also brought in a Grafdigger's Cage. I had it in my head that this Goblins deck that I played on MTGO was going to be so popular that I brought in the Grafdigger's Cage because I was like, oh, maybe it's just a weird build that's also running Chaos Caves Adventure. No, that was a bad call on my part, bad read. Ultimately, too, I tried talking myself into it during sideboarding, being like, well, the final chapter of the initiative, he gets to look through and put a card in at whatever time he wants. And it's like, oh, maybe that'll, Grafdigger's Cage will help with that. Ultimately, this was just a terrible read, and I should have just stayed away from the Grafdigger's Cage. Maybe went for more land hate, something there. This is the point in the tournament where I felt my lowest. This is 3 straight matches, 3 hours in a row where it was just loss. Like the first match, at least it was close, right? I had a win, a loss, and then we went to turns. Match 2, overrun, very quick over. Match 3, same thing, very fast game. At the end, the opponent, I don't know what was going on with the opponent. He was pretty talkative at the beginning, but towards the end, he just seemed kind of like his entire mood had changed, and he just was disinterested. I don't know what happened. That got my head a little bit too at the end, but I was just feeling like crap about myself. Earlier in the week, though, I had watched a 3BNU video, which I will also link here, about expectation setting. This is a giant event. It's highly competitive, and I had just started Legacy earlier in the summer, about the time that they had announced EW Pittsburgh. So I was still very new. I was still collecting pieces. So it was just a rough time, and I should have had better expectations for myself going into the event. I thought I had told myself, let's just record and try to get better. But once you're there, you kind of get in your head about like winning, because that's all you see. Dan mentioned it, I think, on the podcast. You only ever see people in the echo chamber posting their wins, and then you get in your head thinking like, man, I must be the worst player ever. All I ever do is lose. 56% of the time, that's how often the pros are winning their games. They have like a 56% win rate. It's not that big. If you're at 50%, you're an average player. If you're at 51%, you're above average. There's a lot of luck. And ultimately you shouldn't tie goals and how you feel about that your performance at events like these to things that other people control, right? Like my opponent mulligan probably to hate pieces the first game or the second game on Mono Red Prison. And that's how I was able to get overrun. That's okay. Like, I can't control that. What I can control is what I do. Now, yes, I'm disappointed I misread. But what does that do? That lets me think, okay, no longer do I have to, should I zoom in and focus only on this one deck that I'm worried about? I need to back up a little bit and think about all the decks I've played against, because I played against Prison before. I know what it's like. I should have seen this coming. But that's okay. After this bit of a talk, like I had a lot of time left in the round, so I was able to just kind of sit there, talk myself down, and I felt a lot better. I walked, and I think that's about the time I went and got my my Brazen Borrower signed. So that was really nice. Let's go though in round 3. Look at Jesse Ma here. He's the one that beat me. Legacy Champs. I was also his only win before he dropped. So he something must have happened where maybe he did the math in between rounds or in between games or something, and that's why his attitude changed. He realized he wasn't going to be doing well and just decided to drop. I'm not sure. I can't control what he thinks, but ultimately I placed better than he did because he did 511th. So let's go back to round 3 here. Round 3, as you can see here, was against Mono Red Burn. This opponent, very, very nice guy. Very friendly, very chill. He's mainly a modern player, and just likes going to competitive Magic stuff. I think he was coming from Illinois or Rhode Island or something. He drove quite a bit to get to the event, and he was having fun, just kind of being in a big group of people playing Magic. Mono Red Burn was kind of easy. Round 1, no mull. I was able to win that. Ultimately, I went down to, I think, 8. I took a lot of damage, but slamming down the Murktide kind of sealed the deal. And I was able to kind of smash in for more than he was able to deal back. And then I think I got to a point where the crackback after his creatures, it would have been good. I think he was down to like 1 mountain. I think he had only 1 mountain or something for the longest time on that round, and he just couldn't push enough damage out in time. Round 2, also no mull, but I brought in Hydroblasts and Spreading Seas. Spreading Seas was a bit of a thing because I know that deck runs low on mana, and I was hoping to be able to just choke him out and buy myself some time while I got Murktide Fuel. Ultimately, that's what ended up happening. I was able to Hydroblast, I think, a threat he had, get Spreading Seas out, and then get a Murktide down and just finish him off in 2 shots. His red burn deck, I think, how many lands was he running? Yeah, 18 lands. He ended up drawing the Barbarian Ring, which is what I put Spreading Seas on. But his record, he was 0-4. So he played one more round after the round. No, that was the final round. He felt pretty bad, I think. I think he also went and just played Modern. But he was an awesome guy. He let me go through his Modern Murktide list. Very, very friendly. Love playing against him. Would love to play against him again. I would want him to be on a better deck, though. Round 4. Oh, nope, that was just round 4. Sorry. Round 5. I was against Boros Initiative. This Boros Initiative was one of the bigger contenders at the weekend. I think there was a lot of Boros Initiative people there. The decks are relatively affordable and relatively consistent. So that was it was probably just a matter of time before I got to that matchup. But what we have here, round 1, I didn't record any mulligans, but I was able to win. I was able to choke out, from what I remember, because this was like 10 days ago. I wish I would have taken more notes on this matchup. As the day went further and further, my note taking just kind of went downhill. This event took a lot of stamina, and it was really hard to kind of just keep focus on playing as well as taking my little notes down between matches or between games. Anyways, so I believe I was able to choke him out on Stifle Effects and Wastelands. Also, I was able to prevent a turn 1 Archon. Yeah, it was an Archon. I forget the exact name of the creature. Yeah, there it is. Archon of Myria. I didn't really want to be able to... I wanted to be able to cantrip multiple times. Also, this is a 2/3 flyer, so it would have killed anything except for maybe my Murktides. So I really wanted to kind of get that out of the way. So, yeah. I was able to counter that, ultimately flipped a Delver, I think on turn 2 or 3, and was just able to smack in with a Delver. Game number 2 here. This is, I made a mistake here. I got really aggressive trying to find my hate pieces and mulled 3 times down to 4 cards. I was not able to string anything together, and the opponent was able to just get their game plan out and play and just smack me. He was running things like, what the heck? We just had it up. Right. Oh, it is still up. So yeah, he was running, what is the sorcery? 4th Aerlingus. It creates X/2/2 red haste human creatures and gives you the Monarch. Fables, Shatterskull Smashings. He was just running a lot. I believe he brought in Blood Moons and Unlicensed Hearses against me, I think. Or a Trinisphere. I can't remember specifically what he brought in against me. But yeah, I definitely was too aggressive. I did make him play out his entire win, though, just to try and see more of his deck. Round 3, I didn't record a mulligan, but I did end up winning this. I was able to pull more of the control card on this than the tempo. I just kept things kind of... I kept a hand, I think, that didn't contain any threats, but it had a lot of card drawn selection. Again, had to counter a turn 1 Archon, which really helped. Ended up around getting 2 threats down and able to work the opponent down. On the last turn of the game, the opponent was able to resolve an Archon, and he had 2 cards left in hand. Earlier in the game, he had used a Simian Spirit Guide to pay for a daze, I believe. And so on my next turn, I had drawn a what's it called? A Surgical Extraction, and I used that to target his Simian Spirit Guide in the graveyard, because I was scared that if I attacked in with my 2 creatures, he's going to block with the Archon on 1, and then Lightning Bolt or something with a Simian Spirit Guide in his other hand, or with some piece of removal. Luckily, that was the correct play, because he had absolutely nothing in hand and he was trying to bluff me. And as soon as he saw that, he just folded and was like, "I've got nothing. You're gonna see what's in my hand. You're gonna trample over it." So I felt like that was a really good call there on my part to try and just get a little bit of knowledge and protect my board. Let's see here. And so ultimately he played the full 9 rounds that day, and went 3-6. So he finished at 567th. So he'd still finished ahead of me. He probably had more game win. Yeah, he had more game wins, I think, than I did overall. But it was fun playing against him. We had a lot of fun. It was one of those matches kind of where you guys just banter back and forth a little bit. Very friendly. Would 100% play against this guy again. Next match was against Teamer Tempo. This was a long match. In game 1, I did no mulligans recorded there. I was able to win and get a few consistent threats down and protect them. I was also able to stop a lot of his early creatures that gave him card selection. So that was mainly like Dragon Rage Chandler. I was able to keep those off the battlefield, so he couldn't fill his graveyard and he couldn't, filter his draws. So that was very good. Let's see here. Round 2, I also didn't record a mulligan, but that one I ultimately lost against him. I was able to work him down to 9 life, and I think he just had enough removal to deal with my Murktide, and was able to kind of smash in with his smaller creatures after that. Because this fellow, Teamer Tempo, it's a lot like Teamer Delver, but just a little different, right? He's got this thing called Nimble Mongoose. That was a neat card. It was Shroud. It had Shroud, so it couldn't be the target of any of my spells or abilities. And as long as he had Threshold, it got +2/+2. So a lot of my stuff was able to block it and kill it, but it also killed a lot of my things. Very cool card concept that the guy pulled. Very fun. But what else did he do? Yeah, he had the Dragon Rage Chandlers. He had the Questing Druids. I was able to counter, I think, almost every one of his Questing Druids. Because he refused to just cast the Questing Druid and would always seek the beast first, which I believe allowed me to use Force of Negate a couple times against him. He also was running Brazen Borrower, Mishra's Bauble, Ponderers. I think game 1, he had a hard time getting mana as well. He was just mana screwed for over half the game on game 1. Let's see here. Right, yeah, he was able to, so game 3, I didn't record a mulligan. Again, this is probably because I was getting tired at that point. We ended up going to turns here, and we played out all 5 turns. I was able to get him down to 9 life, and I was at 19. It's because I was able to resolve an early Murktide. I think that's because I did a self-mill with Thought Scour early in the game. He was actually really impressed with that. Or not impressed, but I got the comment of whoa, Thought Scour. because I was targeting myself. So he was really he was like, that's some slick stuff there, trying to get the Murktide out fast. Ultimately, the opponent gave me the game win. He because he said he didn't have anything to deal with my Murktide, but also it seemed like he just wanted to leave. His other buddy had already dropped because he lost too many games, and I told him I'm going to try and go on as far as I can. Ultimately, though, we'll talk about the next game. Ultimately, what happened, but very nice guy. He was really fun. He was 2-4 at the time that he dropped. So he was having a bit of a rough time too. He finished 610th, and there were no similar decks in the tournament to him, which was pretty cool. But that was really fun. He was a great guy. We talked a bit. He gave me some tips saying, like, against other Delver style decks, I should board out my Force of Negations. My Force of Wills, because they're card disadvantage, and I want to be card neutral or card positive against other control decks that are running the forces, the force cards. I don't know how well I feel about that, because ultimately in game 3, like, I was able to force a couple things from him, and that's kind of what helped me out. But to each their own. It makes sense the way he said it. I don't know if I would want to take them all out, though. And lastly, round 7. This was my last round. This was like 7-8 hours because every round went over. It was almost 1,000 people. You're going to have games that go over because they're doing deck checks. The control decks are going to take a while. It's just a lot of people moving, and it's fine. But it was definitely over 7 hours at this point. There was a glitch right before this match, like between 6 and 7, that prevented Melee from distributing the rounds. So between that time, I went to time with a Teamer Aggro guy and talked to him a little bit after the game. By the time I got to my seat for match 7, I was starting to think, I was like, oh man, I kind of got to go to the restroom. Let me just go. But as soon as I said that, they announced that the round was starting because Melee was down, right? So they were just like, oh, yep, it's time to start the round. And my opponent showed up and everything. I was like, oh, dang it. Okay, well, we'll just have to go through this and try to hurry it up. Unfortunately, we did not hurry up because I was against, it says Golgari Loam. I called it Pox. It felt more like a Pox deck to me, but Jeff C here had Golgari Loam, and he won. Also, this is an interesting record that he's got. I will talk about here in a minute. Anyways, yeah, so round 1, I had to mulligan once. I recorded that, but ultimately lost. I could just not stop his Life from the Loam from bringing his like Urza's Saga back, and I think I ended up just losing to Constructs at this time. The round, but there was so much interaction in this game that the round took 30 minutes. With whatever it was, he was able to resolve a Liliana the Veil at one point, and he had Retrofitter Foundry out. Oh yeah, this game he had Retrofitter Foundry out pretty early, and I had a Murktide out, and he was just able to constantly chump block my Murktide because he had enough mana to run the Retrofitter Foundry, so he was able to tap the Foundry, create a 1/1 servo for 2 mana, untap it with 3 mana, tap it again to sacrifice the servo and create a 1/1 Thopter. Yeah. And so, like, he was able to run, 6 mana. He was able to run 6 mana constantly to just continuously block my big creatures. And what sucked, I think I had a Brazen Borrower out or something as well, but I just could not, with the Brazen Borrower, I could not attack because it's a 2/1, right? I just realized too that you guys can't really see what I'm seeing. Let me move things over. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so yeah, he had the Retrofitter Foundry out, and that just made things terrible. Currency Converter was also a rough card to play against. Whenever he discarded a card, he was able to exile it from his graveyard, and then tap 2, draw a card, then discard a card. He was also able to tap and put an exile card with his Currency Converter into his graveyard, and if it was a land card, he created a treasure. If it was a non-land, he created a 2/2 Black Rogue. Now, his whole deck's game plan was to cycle through lands to build things up, such as construct tokens, and just to provide him with a lot of value with things like Ghost Quarters, where he could destroy target land and stuff like that. Luckily, being a mono blue deck, I was able to just not have to deal with his Wastelands and Ghost Quarters, which was really helpful. He ran Cling to Dust a couple times also, which was really frustrating, being able to escape that and just run things through. But Life from the Loam was what was really killing me. Just him being able to bring those annoying cards back from his graveyard. The round itself was like 30 minutes, and he ended up winning. If I go and look at the actual thing here, I was able to get him at one point down to 7, and he started gaining life up to 15 and stuff like that. But yeah, I believe he was able to get a Shadow Spear. That's what it was. He was able to get a Shadow Spear, resolve it, and he was able to start gaining life. And I gave up the game at that point because there's no way. It was like a 7. It was either a 7 or an 8/8 construct. No way I could do that. Round 2, I didn't record a mulligan, but I lost again. We had to it was just the same kind of thing, just a long, drawn-out game. We ended up, I think, going to turns, but he was able to kill me before we got to turn 5. Really what did me in here was Bowmasters. I had, he also, on this one too, before I get to the Bowmasters, he was able to resolve the rack in this. And I was pretty low on cards at that point. I think I had like 1 or 2 I had 1 in hand. And so at the beginning of my upkeep, I lost some life because of the rack. So I just kind of held cards in my hand until I had enough. Like, the rack delayed me because I didn't want to be taking all that extra damage. With that, what killed me, though, was Bowmaster triggers. He was able to resolve a Bowmasters midway through the game. And I just could not find anything to deal with that Bowmasters. A lot of my graveyard hate, or not graveyard hate, I brought in, what did I bring in? I think I brought in my land hate, so the back to basics. I brought in the surgical extractions and a null rod. Null Rod was to shut off the Shadow Spear as well as the Foundry. So, unfortunately, I just couldn't find any of it. I think I ended up... No, I did have a Back to Basics, but it was more pertinent for me to try and get threats on the field. So I ended up playing Back to Basics. No, I ended up pitching it to a Force of Will or something. And I was unable to just bring the hate on this... on this guy. So that was unfortunate. Ended up losing, and but we did have to also call over a judge for clarification. So I knew the ruling on this, But he was starting to question it, and I just immediately threw my hand up and yelled for a judge because I wanted there to be no question about it on what would happen. So his Urza's saga went to chapter 2, and I stifled it. And I stifled the triggered ability, and he tried to Veil of Summer this. So this is 2 times now people have tried to Veil of Summer. But that's not what confused him. He knew that he remembered because he had previously done that in the past where Veil of Summer fizzled because the stifle was hitting a triggered ability. But what happened was he didn't understand that because the saga got a second counter, but never got the ability to make constructs. So that part was tripping him up for a bit. And that's exactly why I called the judge over, so the judge could explain it in his judgely ways. So he was actually a little peeved about that, that he couldn't make constructs and make it go faster. But yeah, that was my last game, my last round. At this point in the roundup, let's see. Let's just talk real quick also about, this guy had a unique deck also. So just to talk about his rounds, he played the full 11 rounds, and he went 5-5-1. In round 1, what? This is so weird. Okay. Yeah, so he won my game, but had 3 game wins, which was weird. The judge entered it for us, so I don't know what happened there. To me, that's just odd, and I don't know why that happened. But yeah, guy got 16 points. He ranked 248, so he was top 52. He did better than I did. So congrats, Jeffrey. But that being said, the Mono Blue Tempo deck definitely was a fun deck. I had a great time. I learned a ton about myself as a player. I highly recommend anybody who wants to become better at Magic, go to one of these tournaments. Go to a tournament that is large and highly competitive and not an RCQ. Because this thing just gave me so much insight to myself as a player, and maybe how I need to think about Magic for myself. Like, the biggest takeaway is being able to control what others can do. So I can't control what others can do, so I'm going to not focus on that, on becoming better. I should not focus on where I place to put my value as a player. I should put it on things that I can control, right? I've identified I had a problem identifying a deck because I was too worried about another deck that shared similar cards. I also, had a point where I was mulliganing too aggressively. I had a point where I was playing too rapidly and making mistakes. These are all points where I can control, and I can work on those. That is where I kind of need to focus, it seems like, for my next tournament. And I think the next tournament I'm going to that's going to be of this scale is going to be the Standard Open in Chicago. So I'm going to still continue playing Legacy. I love the format. There's a lot of goofy, wacky things you can do in it. Absolutely fun and a blast. And I'm just going to keep working. While I was there, I was able to pick up a playset of Time Spiral. So I think I might try my hand at some High Tide. I have a couple ideas maybe for some adjusted decks or modified High Tides from the standard list to try and maybe make them more competitive. But that's for another video. This one, though, focus on what you can control is the biggest thing with these tournaments. Focus on what you control. Don't put stock into your placement on how good of a player you are. Again, the pros only win like 50 to 56% of the time. If you're doing 51% win average for that tournament, you're doing better than half the people out there. So just remember, it's a game, right? If you want to become better and competitive, work on it. You can definitely work on that, but it's you really have to work on what you control. There's just going to be matchups that you are just not equipped for, like me, right? Elves, I could not. There was no way I was going to be able to beat a big go wide strategy like that unless I was able to get under it in time. With that, though, I'm going to say here, keep calm and spike on.